When I was 5 years old, I was sitting on the floor at our house playing Barbie dolls, and my mom walked in and she said, "It's hot outside." Says, "You and John, my brother, 2 years older, says you go on down ahead and go swimming, and me and your sister Terry," says she was like 3 years older, "we'll be down after a bit." So we got in our trunk. My brother got in his trunks. I'm in my little bikini. Actually, I'm 5, and we rushed out the back door and we ran down the hill to the pond right below the hill to our house. And he doesn't watch out for little sister. He wasn't that kind of brother. And so he goes as fast as he can, and he goes to the farthest end of the pond, and he dives in and he does laps from swimming from there to the middle of the pond and back. So I walk over to the side of the pond where we always went as a family. We never got to go alone. So this was a big treat to get to go down alone to go swimming. But yet it seemed kind of wrong and kind of scary. Like, I'm too little to be down here alone, nobody watching me. And I thought, well, my parents always said when they were sitting there with me on the bank before, watching me swim or try to swim, I can only dog paddle, they'd say, feel your feet around the bottom because there's drop-offs. So be careful, because you'll go under. And usually an older sibling would be there beside me in case I'd get in too far, and they'd grab my arm and pull me back up. But now I'm alone, so I just stay kind of like my ankles, maybe not up to my knees yet, because I'm thinking, where's those drop-offs? And I want to in the water. It's a hot day, and I keep looking up the house for Mom and my sister to come because I'm anxious to go in. And I'm getting impatient, wanting to wait, waiting. And so I see a board floating in the water, and I thought, I bet I could use that as a raft, and I could swim and do laps like my brother's doing from the point I'm at out to the middle and back. So I put my little belly on that board, and it worked perfect as a raft. And I swim clear out to the center of the pond, and I yell at my brother, "Hey, John, look at me." He swims real fast out to me, not to rescue little sister because she can't swim middle of the pond. No, he swims out real fast, takes my board, which is my raft, and takes off doing his laps. So I'm in the middle of the pond at 5 years old, and I can't swim. I can't tread water. I could dog paddle a little, but I'm in too deep to do anything. And it wasn't long at all that my little face is now under the water, and I cannot get it back above water. And the water is muddy brown, and I'm lost under the water. I quickly lose direction, which is up, which is down, what's sideways, because I'm trying to get back up, and I've lost all sense of direction. And I'm screaming underwater. And I think of my mom and my sister, who I looked up as my protectors. And it was such a horrible feeling knowing I'm somewhere where nobody can hear me scream and no one can see I need help. And I was so scared. I'm choking on the water. I'm tumbling in the water. I'm afraid of going down deeper. And then all of a sudden, I'm at the ceiling of our house looking down. And I see my mom and my sister down there. I'm invisible, but I see them. And I don't hear anything of this earth. I only hear their emotions, and I feel their thoughts. I just feel this calm concentration each one of them has as they're looking in the cabinets trying to find things to bring down, like they're going to have a picnic when they come down to the pond. And then I'm right back. It only lasted like a minute, and I'm back in the water choking again. And now it feels like my throat is going to burst wide open. It hurts so bad, and I can't take it anymore. The next thing I know, it's like I'm waking up, like when you wake up from a nap and you have that real relaxed, calm feeling, everything's right with the world. That's how I felt. And now the water is like it's settled. It's not that muddy brown. It's this light, transparent green. And so I'm not so scared because I'm not having trouble breathing. And I can see. And I've noticed that I've went down deeper, which before would have scared me because I want to go back above the water. And the fish are bumping into me. And they're right in front of my face. And I thought, this is so strange because when Dad takes us fishing, and sometimes us kids would just try to grab the fish with their bare hands, the fish always got away. But they're bumping right into me, like they're not afraid. And when I had this question of like, I don't understand that, the scene opens up like this television screen in the water. And it shows a memory of me sometime before. I was in the house in the living room, and I had walked over to the fish bowl. Mom had put pink rocks in a treasure chest in the fish bowl, and I put my hand in there. And I remember thinking on that day, well, how come the fish are afraid of my hand but not afraid of that treasure chest? And so now I'm looking at that scene, and the fish are bumping into me, as I'm underwater, and like a light bulb of thought comes on, like, oh, I get it. Those fish know something I don't. I'm dead. Like I'm an object, like that treasure chest was in the fishbowl. I'm not this live thing. They're not afraid of it. I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to be a dead girl at the bottom of this pond. And with that thought, I started to rise to the top of the water. And I realized just by wanting something, it was like my way of moving. It's like if you had a car that went wherever you wanted, it just went by what you wanted. You didn't need a vehicle. And so I realized I'm at the top of the water. I have a choice. I can go above the water or stay below. I thought, well, I'm bored with below. I'll go above. And I started to go above, and I thought, I'm afraid of heights. And I'm having this conversation with myself because there's this dialogue going on. And when I thought I'm afraid of heights, then myself would answer myself, well, that's silly. You're dead now. And so I thought, well, I'll go slow. I'll take it slow for now. I can go higher later. I'll just go as high as the treetops for now. I got as high as the treetops, and I looked around, and I could see like 360 degrees, but from high up. And I looked down at the ground in front of the pond, and I thought I could only see from my height before. Now I can see way up, and that was cool. I felt like a helicopter hovering. And I could see clear across the highway. I could see clear to the high river. I could see both ends of the train tracks going way down both ends. I could see the top of our hill past our house. And I could see over the treetops. And I was just thinking, well, this is cool. And I thought, well, I can hover, so I suppose I could fly. Which way should I go? And I hear a voice in front of me, a certain distance. I could tell where, like, she was. It was a female voice, but I couldn't see anyone. And it said, don't go yet. If they find you soon, you might go back. And I thought, go back? That's not how death works. Like at 5 years old, I knew that much. I'm thinking, this woman don't know what she's talking about. And I think, well, I'll be good for a little while, but I don't think I have to listen to adults anymore. I don't have to go in at bedtime. I don't have to eat my vegetables. I don't have to worry about getting in trouble. I think I can do whatever I want now. And so I was good for a little while. I hovered. But then I thought, I'm going to go. Like, who's going to stop me? Like, what are you going to do? And so I went to the right, and there was a house along the woods. And I'm going between the house and the woods. And I don't know where this house is. I've drove around there. I've never seen a house that looks like this. But there was a house along the woods, and there's a back door going into the kitchen. And I went right through the door to the kitchen. And there's old people sitting around a table. And they look at me. They stop talking, and they look at me when I come in. And I'm shy because this was 1966. At 5 years old, I knew not to interrupt adults when they're talking. I don't know if kids are like that today. I don't think so. But I thought, I don't want to interrupt, And so I said, I ducked my head in shame because I know I'm being bad. And I said, I'm looking for kids to play with. And a man with white hair at the end of the table said, try the graveyards. And so I left. And nobody else at that table said anything. And I left, and I went back to the pond, and I thought, well, I'll go the other direction towards town. Maybe there's graveyards. I'm sure there's graveyards there. And so I went back towards the pond, and I'm going flying over the highway, and there's two boys walking along carrying fishing poles and buckets. And I'm walking along beside them, and I'm trying to get their attention, and they're not hearing me. And so I keep bugging them. Where are you going? What are you doing? What are you doing? And then the younger one, it seems like we're like telepathically talking. And he's, we're in a hurry. We're running late getting home, been fishing. And so I went flying on down the highway. I dipped down at Marietta. It's called the West Side where my grandma lives. And there was kids playing in the yard. They're playing kickball. I start going around playing kickball with these kids. And I realized, well, they don't see me either. And so I went in and out of houses, just floated in and out on the left side going to my grandma's house. And that memory stops there. At the same time, this is happening because it's not like chronological order. It's like, okay, I have these memories of doing that, but I know I never left the center of the pond. Like part of me went and played like I was told not to. It's like part of me stayed because part of me is hovering over the pond, and I looked down like I had been gone for a while, and I now see that my mom and my sister is on the entrance of the pond, sitting in the grass on a bed sheet. They're rubbing lotion on their arms, and they're looking at each other talking. And I could feel, again, their emotions. It was very female, mature, and I felt jealous because I'm never going to be old enough to have a relationship with my mom to get to talk to her like my older sister does. And I felt sad about that. And I looked down the other end of the pond, and I see my brother John on my board doing his laps, and I got really angry because he took my board. He caused me to drown. And I thought nobody even noticed that I'm gone. They don't even know I'm dead yet. And I got a knowing that my family didn't love me. It wasn't because of this, that they didn't notice I was gone. It was just a knowing. And I'm like, well, I knew my dad didn't like me, and my siblings don't like me, and my oldest sister is mentally disabled. I don't really know. She knows, what day it is. But I thought my mom loved me. And then a voice clearly inside me, but not my voice, something said to me, God sends children here to be loved. That's why he sends them here. I'm like, wait a minute. You show me I'm not loved by my family and you tell me that? Well, that's not fair. And a strong sense of injustice grew in me. Like, I just hate anything that's not fair. Like, I can't deal with it. And so this strong sense of injustice grew. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up. I'm being carried over my brother's right shoulder. He's walking on the road to our house before we get to the train tracks. I can see the gray pavement of the road, and I'm throwing up this pond water down his bare back. And he says, Mom, can I put her down now? And as I'm dangling over his shoulder, I see my mom and my sister are on his right up ahead of him, walking up towards the hill. And they both turn around at the same time and look, and my mom goes, takes a big sigh, and she shakes her head, yes. And then they turn right around and keep walking, and I feel their emotions again. So this came back with me, not just during the NDE sensing emotions, but I now sense people's emotions. And it was like they're best friends instead of mother and daughter. Like, mom's got a secret she don't want to get in trouble for. This happened to me. She only wanted to know. And they went up to the house. My brother sits me down on my feet and takes off running and goes to the house. So now I'm standing there at 5 years old with this knowledge of everything that just happened, with the knowledge my family don't love me. And I thought, why would I go to that house? The family don't love me. I think I'm going to go back to the pond. And I know it really hurts to drown, but I'm not going to fight it this time. And I felt I had a right. Like it was my life. I'll do what I want. And I wanted to go back to flying, and that was good. So I'm going to do that. I took a couple of steps to go back towards the pond on the road, and that voice that I heard before says, no, don't go yet. If they find you soon, you might go back, is now there again. And it says, no, don't. And it's a shape of a young woman in a flowing white gown with like wide sleeves at the end. And she's transparent, and she's hovering over the road. And she says, no, don't. I said, why? You know they don't love me. And she goes, well, you'll have a lot of love someday. And I said, where will I find it? And she takes her arm and she points it towards Belpre. And then I go up to the home and, live my life as a 5-year-old. But I'm changed. There were some strange spiritual experiences after that for a while. And then we were at the Vito Lake with my dad. He took us 5 kids and my mom fishing, maybe, I'm guessing, a week later, sometime not too far off after the drowning, because when we were fishing, I started to wander off towards the woods, and my mom cupped her hand and told my brother John, go with her. And he ran after me. He says, not my fault you drowned. And my sister come there. And she says, well, don't worry about her, come play over here with me. And so I went off to the woods, and I went over to these woods, and I seen a flower growing out in this dry, cracked mud. And I sat down and looked at it, and somehow, I believe it was the angel, started having communication with me again. Because this knowing and this connection with that same type of experience started up again. And it said that I would have the will of a wildflower, like this flower I was watching. It said, you're going to have a very hard road to go. You're going to grow up in a very rough environment, like this wildflower is. But because of it, you will have a strength inside of you that other girls will never know. You'll have the will of a wildflower. And so, as I got older, I look back on these memories and I couldn't make sense of them for decades. But I did have a very hard childhood, and with abuse and sexual abuse and severe neglect, severe emotional maltreatment. And when I turned 18, I said a prayer to God that I would never forget what it was like to go through all that, and that someday I would do something to help abused kids. I got married at 18, had a baby at 19, another one at 20. And I married a guy into a big Catholic family. They had 12 kids. I always wanted 10 kids, so I thought marrying a Catholic I would get that. But he made me get my tubes tied when I was 20. And I found out a few years later I could get it reversed. And I begged him for a year, and he wouldn't let me. Finally, he says, fine, you won't shut up until I agree. So I got my tubes reversed. And the doctor said that every woman has 5% chance of dual pregnancy. This will give me an extra 5%. Well, I've since learned it's a lot higher than that when you get your tubes reversed. But I believed him. I was 25. And so I got a call that I was pregnant, and I was pregnant for twins. And I went outside and I yelled at my neighbor, and I told her, and she happens to be a twin, and I fell to my knees. And she come running and put her arm around me, and we were both crying because having been sterile for 5 years and thought I would never be able to conceive again. And then not just pregnant, but pregnant for twins. I mean, I was so ecstatically happy. And then I started having pain. And I was 2 months pregnant. I was already starting to show, and which I was real tiny back then. But I was starting to have pain. I called my doctor and I said, there's something wrong. I'm having pain. He says, Peggy, I did an ultrasound when you were in the office. Both babies are in the uterus. It's not a dual pregnancy. I said, okay. So a few more days went by. I called him back. I was like, the pain is so bad I can hardly get off the couch. Peggy is fine. It's probably where you've had 2 C-sections. You had tubal reversal surgery. Now you're pregnant. It's a lot of scar tissue. So that's probably what it is. A couple more days go by, and I can't get out of bed. It hurts so bad. So I had my husband take our boys. We have my 2 boys plus my mentally disabled sister. We were in the process of adopting her little boy. So my boys were like 3, 4, 5 at the time, or maybe 4, 5, 6. And he took him down to his mom's, and come out and got me and drove me to the hospital. And it's an hour drive. And the pain was getting more severe as we're driving there. All of a sudden, my pain faded in such a strange way. I had a knowing I was dying. And I couldn't tell my ex that because we just did not have a close relationship. He never wanted to hear anything about the abuse I had growing up or any problems with my family. So he wasn't someone I could talk to. So I just said a prayer. And I said, God, don't let me die right here on the highway, because it would freak him out. He would probably pull over and, cars would have to stop. I said, we're almost to the hospital, just a couple more miles. If I'm going to die, just let me die there. So we got to the hospital. We walked in, and I went to the nurse's desk. And I said, I don't know if I'm going to throw up or pass out, because I was feeling real sick and nauseous now. And the pain was gone. But I said, but I think it's a dual pregnancy. So she gave me a blue bowl, told me to sit in a wheelchair, had my husband stay and fill out papers. And she started down this long hall to find a room. And just as we started down that hall, I wanted to get that bowl. I had my hands on the armrest of the wheelchair, and I wanted to get that blue bowl she put in my lap. And I realized I lost I lost contact with my body. I couldn't tell my hands to pick up the bowl. I couldn't lift a finger. And I thought, well, I've lost contact with my body. I thought, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to throw up. I'm going to pass out. And I'm going to pass out right now. And I didn't think passing out was a big thing because I'd had irritable bowel from stress, from dealing with so much from my family and his family, that I would pass out. It got so bad 2-3 times a week. I'd be vomiting and just pass out. So it wasn't a big deal to feel like I'm going to pass out. You just wake up refreshed until you get sick again. And there's no dream, there's no visions, nothing. So when I passed out, my chin hit my chest, and suddenly I'm in this tight tunnel, and I'm whizzing real fast way up to space. And I remember saying to myself, I'm so sorry, my children. I didn't want to leave you. And I know I'm dead because I'm not in my body. I'm being whizzed way up through space. And there's a loud, like a wind speed noise, like a rocket. On TV, when you see a rocket take off, you feel that pressure and build, and then it just blows. It's like that. And I looked around like, can I run away? And I'm way too far. I'll never find my way back. And I was just this dread of I have died and I'm not going to get to raise my kids. And so I'm going way up through space, and I see a light at the top, and all of a sudden I'm in this bright white light. I look down and I don't see me, but I feel just like me. I feel like I have eyes and arms and everything. And I'm alone in this white light. And if it was a room, it would be the walls, ceiling, floors white. But in the middle is white. It's like I was in a box contained of light, or this room contained of light. And I'm just hovering in it. And I died. And I had so many thoughts that I don't always go through them all. I'll usually pick a few that I had during that time. Because one of the thoughts was, wow, it's real. The whole God, Jesus, Bible thing, it's real because I'm somewhere. I'm not in a grave. Like my fear from watching scary movies, like you wake up in a casket and there's these bugs, or you're screaming and nobody above can hear you, all those nightmare things. And in my Christian religion, I thought they always said that everybody like goes up at the same time. Like when you die, you stay dead. And then at the end of the world, everybody goes up at the same time. I'm like, well, that must not be how it works because I'm here somewhere. And I also thought that, God, Jesus, it's all real because this must be heaven. And I don't see God, but I'm praying to him as if you say any prayer, And I said, God, you got to send people back. You got to let people know this is real because the Bible's getting old. This is what I said at 25. The Bible's getting old and people are getting tired of reading it, or like people like me don't understand it and sometimes don't make any sense. And if people went back, they could tell people that it's real. And I think back now that I thought that, and it's so strange having a podcast that I, interview near-death experiencers. But I think back to those thoughts, and then I thought, well, why am I alone? Am I going to be alone for eternity? Like, where is everybody? If this is heaven, like, where's it all at? Because this is just white. And then my eyes catch, because I feel like I still have eyes. Like, there's somebody there, and I look over to my right, and I almost see an outline of people from head and shoulders, and makes a line, and then my eyes drop down, and it seems like there's another group, like maybe one line is standing, a line of people, and the next is sitting in front of them, and then my eyes catch on one that seems to be sitting up front and center, and I say, that has to be God. And I think I have a complaint department because I don't want to be here. I have kids to raise. So I'm like, hell no, I won't go. You can't make me. And I'm screaming. I'm throwing this big old fit. Like that would work, Like, I can't be here. I have kids to raise because I desperately did not want to be separated from my kids. This would be like, say you're a young mother, you have kids at home, someone kidnaps you and puts you in their basement. You can't get out and be with your family. That, to me, this is what it was like, being held hostage. And I can't be here. Like, thanks, but no thanks, Like, this is a wonderful place, I'm sure. Like, I'm sure there have been more past this white, if I would have stayed. But I got kids to raise. And with the childhood I had, I was scared to death my mom would get custody of my kids. My husband wouldn't raise them. And he drank a lot, and his family drank a lot. His mom was in and out of mental hospitals. Like, who will take care of my kids? And I didn't want them to have the grief of losing their mom and all these things. And then this TV screen opens up, and it was years later before I realized, wait a minute, that's what happened during the drowning. Is this scene opens up to my left, and a scene opens up. It wasn't a memory of anything I'd seen before, but it was as if you just walked into a grocery store and you see a lady cashing out, and there's a boy on the left of the cash register, and he's on the floor throwing a huge fit, demanding what he wants, and he wants it right now. And it seems like there's a mother figure there in front of the cash register. She's like, no, you can't have that. Kind of like, come on out the door, go, you can't have it. And she wasn't affected by the fit. And I realized that was God's like a learning aid. He showed me to help me understand, just like the learning aid of the fishbowl and the drowning. Then in the drowning, it helped me understand that I was dead. This helped me understand the answer was no. I was told it is your time. The answer is no. And that I needed to calm down. Like I needed to settle down, like act like I had some sense. Kind of like a parent would say to you, a child, act like you got sense here. The answer is no. And I'm like, oh, well, I thought, well, I gotta try something else. This baby fit ain't gonna work. So I said, okay, I know from being Catholic you're omniscient. You can see in the future. If you can show me my kids will be better off without me for whatever reason, I agree to stay. But if not, I beg to return. And there's like I'm in the middle of this white light, invisible me, but I see straight across in front of me a physical me screaming out all the abuse I went through. Like my mom did this, my dad did this, my stepdad this, my sibling, blah, blah, blah. And it's like somebody sped up a record player and made it go blah, 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 like, and it's like that helped me understand. God already knows. You don't have to keep going. God knows. Like he knows your reasons. And so when I said that, if you can show me, how my kids would be in the future, then I see a man from behind with shoulder length brown hair, and I assume that's Jesus. And it was like, woof, we're now side by side, and we dip down. And we're just that quick. Now we're above the trailer, and it's nighttime where we lived at the time. And my boys are there, and they're in the bedroom discussing the fact that Mom has died. And my middle son, Jeremy, says to his older brother, Matthew, says, I don't care that you say Mom is dead. I want her back, and I want her back right now. And I felt his pain so bad, I retracted. And now I'm back in the bright white light. And instead of in the center point, seeing this panel, I am like on my knees, crumbled, and right in front of this panel that's sitting. And with still the group behind, that still is all just the outline. But I believe I'm at Jesus' feet now, that Jesus is sitting to my right, which would be God's left. And I'm like crumbled at his feet. And I say, because I realize it's not God's fault that I died, it's mine. I'm the one that got my tubes fixed, tied, and then got them reversed. I took this chance of dual pregnancy. It's my fault my sons are going to be raised without a mother. It's my fault I died. It's my fault the twins are going to die. And I accepted it. And I thought, well, I'll stay right here, and I'll just wait until my sons are like old men and they die, and then they'll be here with me. I'll just sit here and wait. I'll just sit here and wait for my sons when they're older, and then they come. I'll just sit here and wait for them. And then all of a sudden, something hit me. Oh my gosh, what if my sons hate God? I was just so angry at God and blaming him. What if they're angry that their mother was taken at such a young age and they hate God? And so my hands come up in front of my face, and that's the first time this invisible me has a physical body, because I see my hands right in front of my face, and they're up like this. And I'm trying to look at Jesus, but I can't see him, so I'm crumbled at his feet. And I say, who else will teach them about you? And then I'm back in the wheelchair. And I think, what the hell was that? I was just in heaven accepting it. And I felt my hands on the armrest of the wheelchair. I could hear the nurse talking to somebody else. The chair is stopped. They're talking. And I think, she's so busy socializing, she doesn't even know her patient just died. And something told me, once I feel my feet, I'm all the way back. And I sat there and waited a little bit, and I felt my feet. And then she pushed me down to this room, into the hall, and put me on this table, jacked it way up, and this great big light above it. And my husband come in, and he's holding my knees down because I'm shaking. I'm so freezing cold. Like, I don't know if my body was in shock or what. And then the doctor comes in, my doctor, who happened to be on call, and he examines me. He thinks maybe I've had a miscarriage. And he sits me up. He says, Peggy, your uterus is still intact. You're still pregnant. Why do you keep saying it's a tubal pregnancy? I told you. I did an ultrasound earlier in my office. Both babies are in the uterus. And I could not tell him because I was just dead in heaven, accepting it. Something killed me. I had to have been a tubal pregnancy. If it's not, what is it then? I couldn't say anything, so I said, well, I'm not going home. Because I thought, if I go home, I'll die, and I don't want my boys to find me. First along the highway, I don't want my husband to, deal with my dead body. Now, I don't want my kids to have to see my dead body. And I thought that's my only option here. And so he says, well, if it make you feel better, since you live an hour away, he says, you can spend the night, but there's nothing wrong. So my husband went home, the doctor went home. So now, I have the pain's gone, the nausea and is gone, and feel like I'm gonna pass out's gone. So I got in my room, got in the bed, and went to sleep. And I woke up. I had that same pain in my right hip bone. I sat up, got my blue bowl. I woke up and I got vomit everywhere but my bowl. After so many times of doing that through the night, I started realizing I'm not passing out here. I'm dying. No more experiences of being to have anything like that. But it was just a knowing. I'm dying each time here. So I said, God, I know you can't keep bringing me back, but please keep me alive till morning. Maybe my doctor will come in early and do an ultrasound and see what's wrong. I asked the nurse to call a doctor. She said she wouldn't call and wake him up. So the next morning, orderly come. He said, we'll take you down to ultrasound. Oh, good. We're going to find out what's wrong here and fix it. And he says, get in the wheelchair, and I'll get you a sheet for your lap, and I'll be right back. And I said, well, every time I sit up, I pass out. He said, well, I don't have an order to take you down in your bed, so you get in the chair and I'll be right back. Next thing I know, I'm in my bed because I got in the wheelchair. Now I'm in my bed, and the whole staff of nurses was looking down at me with smelling salts. And they said, we're going to have to take you flat in your bed down to ultrasound because every time you sit up, you pass out. And I thought, I told the nurse that all night. And she says, you scared the orderly to death. So he come back in with the sheet, and I was mooning him. I was bent clear over with my head on the floor. So they took me down. As they take me down to ultrasound and flatten my bed, my sister, Terry's in the elevator, and she happens to come to see me, and she sees I'm in it. And she says, oh, I wish I could trade you places. And I said, no, I'm dead. She said, oh, I want to see the twins on the ultrasound. I said, they're dead. That's all I said. Went down to ultrasound, and she's on the left as they're doing the ultrasound, and the technician's on the right with the monitor. And she's, oh, look, Peg, I can see the twins. And I just started to look, and the technician turns the screen where I can't see it. And she jumps up. Her chair falls backwards. She runs through the post in the basement with the phone on it and picks it up and yells, Dr. White, stop. And she runs out of the room. I thought, well, I'm a goner. It's too much time went by. Whatever's wrong, it's too late. And I felt I failed. I felt like God sent me back to give me more time to fix this so I could be with my boys. But I felt like it's too late, And so the doctor comes in. He does the ultrasound. He says, Peggy, it's the worst thing imaginable. You've got internal bleeding filling your entire abdominal cavity, clear up your chest. We've got to get you into surgery. And he says, since you're organ donor, we're going to send you back upstairs to sign the papers, and then I'll meet you back down for surgery in the basement. So they sent me back up. I had to sign all these papers. If you're an organ donor, it takes forever. Like everything, one page at a time. I'm like, come on, don't you have something to take it all? Nope, you got to do it. And then after the papers was signed, they just let me sit there. And, I was like, saved my life, right? I've waited and waited. I called all week, and then I come to emergency room. I went through all this, and I'm going to sit here die now. I'm going to die in this room. And then I was mad. Like, I'm 25. I shouldn't be dying right now. And so then they took me down to surgery, and I found out later they had called my whole family and said I wasn't going to make it. And I didn't know that till later. So they took me down to surgery, and my doctor, he's waiting for the anesthesia to take effect, and I see tears rolling down his cheek, And I just turned my head because I thought, buddy, I called you all week. And then I woke up in my room after surgery, and he's holding my hand. He said, Peggy, I'm so sorry. I know how bad you wanted the twins. And I asked if I could see him. And he looked at me funny. He had to explain to me, they go where the tissue goes, like an incinerator. About 2 months, I would have had nothing to hold. But, I wanted to hold my babies, even though they were dead. And so I come home, and then wasn't long after that, I was pregnant again. And I know a lot of people probably can't understand this. I wanted to raise my boys so bad. But then again, I want another baby so bad. Like, I couldn't make that choice to get sterilized again. Because the doctor said, we've had this tube of pregnancy. We had to remove that tube. It ruptured. So now the only tube is the left, and it wasn't very good shape when you did the reversal. So I'll probably have another tubal. So, like, if I get pregnant, I'll probably die. And I was lucky that God sent me back, but I couldn't make this choice. So I was just dealing with that alone. So we went to a family reunion on my husband's side, and everybody's lined up to eat, and everybody's looking at all this food at the pavilion, and I heard a child crying. And I started going up the line, do you hear a child? Do you hear a child? And there's like, no, and just ignoring me. They just kept looking at food. And I kept going out, and I ended up in the middle of this field, away from the pavilion, and the sound of the child crying had quit. Now, I know I heard a child crying. And I heard a voice. As I looked back, it was like the voice I heard after the drowning from the pond when I was looking at that wildflower. A very clear voice said, look over in that tall grass. Just like, the Vito Lake when we were fishing, it was like, come over here to these woods. It was like, come over here. Of course, I didn't remember all that then. I was just like, I'm looking back now at it. And so I go over to this tall grass, like, nothing's over here. And I see a little toddler, a little boy, barely twitching. I see his back barely twitching. I reach down, pick him up back of his shirt, and stand him up. And he's looking up at me. He's just a tiny little guy, and water's just flooding down his face. And I'm thinking, well, all that water, running out his face, he must distort how I look, because he's looking at me like he's seen a ghost. And he goes over to the pavilion, and he's pointing at me, telling his parents something, like, imagine what happened. I was like, why is he pointing at me like that? And they're looking like, what? Like they don't see anything. I'm standing right here. And that was 1986. In 2010, I was a counselor, and I told that story for the very first time. And this guy, because I recognized his last name, and did you go to those family reunions? I remember this one reunion. This thing happened, and he says, that was you? He says, that was my little brother. He swears this day an angel saved him. I'm like, no, just me. And he's like, I can't wait to tell my mom. We now know who that was that saved him from drowning. And I thought that was strange. And so, over the years, I look back at these things, and then I look back that also strange thing happened is 1 week before the ectopic pregnancy, but right before I started having the pain, it was Easter Sunday. And I was standing on the property we had just bought, and we were talking about where to build our house, and our 3 little boys was playing in the woods, and they weren't that far away. We could still hear them, and all of a sudden, our son Matthew yells, Mom, Jeremy! And it was that blood-curdling scream that no parent ever wants to hear, and I got frozen in fear, and I just started praying while my husband went running the direction of the boys. And I started praying, God, don't take my baby Jeremy. If you have to take a child today, don't take the twins. Or I said, take the twins, don't take Jeremy. And all of a sudden, it was like I wasn't in my body anymore. It was like I was hovering over the field, like between where I stood and where the creek was. And that's where the sound of the boys was the creek. And I was hovering. And now I'm not praying to God. Suddenly I'm praying to my son Jeremy, because I got a knowing something let me know that Jeremy fell in the creek. And I'm thinking, that's not possible. That creek's only been ankle deep. And it said, but we've had a lot of rain and melting snow and the creek's up. Because we weren't familiar with this property. We just bought it. And he fell in. And it's not too deep that if he stood up, he'd be okay. But he's panicked. He's trying to swim. And so suddenly I'm saying, Jeremy, in my prayer, silently, I'm like, Jeremy, stand up. It's not that deep. Come down. Walk out of there. And so Jeremy had walked down a little bit more as I'm praying. And Jeremy come up out of that creek. And just as Dad got there, didn't even look at him. And he comes straight towards me like his eyes in his trance. And he walks right up to him and he looks up. And he says, Mom, was you worried about me? I'm like, oh my God, Jeremy, you're my baby. I fall on my knees and I hug him. Well, that, like I say, that was 1986. And Jeremy was like 5. When he was 20, he was having a New Year's Eve party. And I told that story for the first time. And it was his cousins and his friends in his living room. And Jeremy steps out of the kitchen. He was making a drink with his girlfriend. And he steps out. He says, Mom, I heard you praying. I'm like, what? He says, yeah. He says, that's what it was. He says, I panicked and I was trying to swim. And you said, Jeremy, calm down, stand up. It's not that deep. Walk out of there. So that's what I did. And everybody in the room was like, what? And so I'm now at that time like 40 years old. And I started looking back to the drowning, the issue with the wildflower at the lake, some spiritual experiences I had as a teen, this NDE, at 25, Jeremy, this boy. And then also, too, I remembered right after the ectopic pregnancy, after the boy drowning in the creek, we were coming down the road, and all of a sudden I told my husband, I said, pull over. I got to go in that house. I didn't know why. And I just took off running out of the car. And I knocked on the door, and it happened to be my ex-sister-in-law. And I says, what are you doing here? And she says, I'm babysitting my nephew. I said, take me to him right now. I ran in the house, and he's in that bedroom with the door shut, choking on Easter basket grass. And I put him under my arm. I run to the bathroom. I start pouring water in the tub, and I hold him upside down, get my fingers wet, and just keep pulling that out. And she says, this day, you saved his life. She wouldn't know what to do. And so I'm like, why did that happen? And it seems to me like the only logical conclusion I can come to is that the waves, when I was hovering over the pond at the drowning, like those come back with me, feeling somebody's emotions and hearing thoughts, hearing voices giving you guidance about things you couldn't possibly know, had stayed with me throughout my life. And it seems like after I lost the twins at 25 with that ND, it's like it jump-started all again. That's the only word I know to use, because to have that hearing and knowing and different examples I could give, things that happen. And I don't call myself psychic, I can't tell you anything, I don't have any control over it. But if a voice comes in and wants me to know somebody nearby is in trouble, I will go. And there's something happening. And so what has left me with is I want to know all about this I can. So I started my podcast, you have to hear other people's stories, just so we can start to have a conversation about these things where people can share their stories, their experiences, so maybe we can stop rolling our eyes and saying this couldn't have happened. This can't be true. It doesn't fit with what we know biblically, or some people are atheists, they don't believe in God or Jesus or heaven. What I have found is that even people that aren't Christian will have an experience where a voice is saying something, and they get a knowing and these things. It doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter if you believe in these things or not. The same similar things happen all over the world.
I love the fact that we're now being more open with it and we're sharing this, because it's also validation for people that experience similar things. Now, what I've heard, and this is just what I remember, and I don't know that it's an accurate statistic, but I've been told that roughly 20% of the population has some sort of spiritual experience that cannot be explained through science. So whether it's an NDE or just like a spiritual awakening, or sometimes there's this shared death experience, that 20%, that's a huge number of people. And I tend to think, because that's what I hear from my guests as well, is that a lot of times people do not share this. Because if you don't feel safe in the environment you're in with the close people that you have, then you wouldn't share it, right? You would be the odd one out. You would be the weird one. Mm-hmm. So why would you share it? Just so people could tell you, well, that can't be true. You're just hallucinating, or you just made this up. It was just a dream. So I love the fact that we're now being more open and we're exploring this. And I think also on the science side, it is catching up with the experiences of people. Now, Peggy, what I find very impressive about your story is I've often hear, and one of my good friends as well, he comes from a very dysfunctional family, had a very difficult upbringing. So much so that when I've heard of it, I've said, well, I don't know how you've made it. I don't know how you're here and you're a normal human being, but props to you for being that. And because of that upbringing for him, he wouldn't ever want to get married or have children of his own, right? Because what he knew about family was so dysfunctional. So from you, I'm picking up on the fact that you were so keen to have a family, right? You were so keen to raise kids, to have as many as possible, and yet you didn't have a happy experience in your own family. So where does this need to have a happy family and to raise children and to do it differently come from?
After the drowning at 5 years old, I went up that hill to my house, and I don't know where my family was. I didn't see them. In a small house, so I still don't know where they were to this day. But I went on to my room, got out my wet bathing suit, got on my nightgown, crawled into bed, and I picked up a nursery rhyme, and I was flipping through the nursery rhymes, and I couldn't read, but I knew them by heart by looking at the pictures. And I come to the old woman that lived in a shoe, and I seen all these beds lined up. And I thought about what the angel said, that I have a lot of love someday. And I thought, I wonder if she meant I'd have a lot of children. And this picture, in this book and the story made me wonder if these were orphans, if this old lady had an orphanage. And I thought, maybe, I don't know if I'll have a lot of kids myself, but maybe I'll have orphans. Maybe I'll love unloved kids like me. And so I always wanted a lot of kids and really didn't understand why. And I wanted at least 10, so I married a Catholic. And then I could no longer conceive. I became infertile after the miscarriage, because the moment I lifted up that little boy at the family reunion, I miscarried. And so no more pregnancies again, for 7 years. And then it was another miscarriage. And then I remarried, and we had 3 miscarriages in a row every spring. Went to a specialist, and he said, these are ectopic pregnancies that are dissolving in your tube. He says, this is a miracle that you're even getting pregnant through this. He says, or the opposite, but I felt like God was doing me a favor, but because the 7 years after the twins, I got pregnant then. As my husband and I was going through separation, and he was very upset because he didn't want to pay child support for another child. But it was a tubal pregnancy. My doctors listen to me now. He fixed it right away. And so I wanted a big family. So when I remarried, we continued doing foster care. I had 60 foster kids, therapeutic foster kids. It was a therapeutic agency, a group of child psychologists started, and I just had a knack for it. And my husband, we remarried. I wanted to adopt because my first husband wouldn't, and so we adopted a sibling group of 5, and then we continued doing foster care. And 4 sisters became available a year later, so we ended up adopting 9. So that made 10 adopted, including my nephew. We adopted when my boys were little, and so I think back, why did I do this, and why was this, push for all these kids? And I worked at Children's Services for 8 years doing child abuse investigations. And And I look back at that, after the drowning, and that this looking at that old woman that lived in a shoe. And when we had the 9 adopted kids, before Christmas, I wanted to turn our basement into a big bedroom for all the girls, because we had, of the 9 adopted, 8 were girls. And the basement used to be for our boys. They had a pool table in there. Their friends would come in and out through the basement door, and, they'd have their fun in there. But now that we had all these girls, I thought, I want to paint it purple and put this flower border. I went and spent a fortune, went into debt, and I got canopy beds, white canopy beds for all of them, matching dressers. It was really nice. And I stood back to admire it, and I thought of that picture of the beds lined up and the old woman that lived in a shoe. And I thought, this is so strange for our, look just like that picture. That's made me think of it. And I thought, God, you're so funny. It was like this was meant to happen all along. And then I thought, my ex always said our property is shaped like a boot. And I just stand there alone in the basement, thinking, this is crazy. But it's so crazy that it makes so much sense. And like it was meant to be all along. And sometimes I feel chosen. That I had to deal with the fact that I was an unloved child, like your friend, he didn't want to have kids. And when I was 18, I promised myself that I would never forget what it was like, and I would do something for abused kids. And I started remembering that after I lost the twins. I started having flashbacks of the drowning and of the spiritual experience after the drowning. And back then, in '86, I had no books to read. I had no name for it. So I kept it quiet. I told a few people at the time, that was it. And so it was decades until I started realizing my son heard me praying, and it saved him from drowning. My NDE at 25 saved my life. God let me come back. And the next time I die, I just pictured God's like, did you tell anybody? Because, the first thing I did when I'm in the white light is like, God, you need to send people back so they can tell people. And I'm like, no, I didn't want to look like a liar. I didn't want to look like a fool. And I thought, what's more important? What I know to be true, or what I'm afraid everybody will think that this isn't true? And so I thought, I'm going to start speaking my truth. And I want to hear everybody's story about theirs, and I want to figure this out, because I feel like if I can save my son from drowning through prayer, then we all need to learn how to do that. And I had to learn that when I hear these voices, there's a guy down that road that needs you. I heard that after my divorce. There's a guy down that road has 2 kids that need you. I'm like, what in the world? Like, that's crazy. A month later, I met my second husband, and he lived right down that road. He has 2 girls. It's like the dots were coming to fit, and it's only leading up to one conclusion, that I cannot make this up. There's like no way.
Okay.
So I started wondering, like, what am I chosen? Like, was I chosen for this? A lot of kids drown, and I don't know how long I was under the water, but to come back like that, and then to be told that as a little child, that I'll have the will of a wildflower, that I'd have a hard time growing up because of it. I have a strength inside of me other girls will never know. And then after the twins, to have that other NDE, and to start saving lives and don't understand why. I have this knowing, and when I worked at Children's Services, I didn't know why, I just knew things. And I ended up handling 75% of all the investigations in my county, because people reporting didn't trust anybody else but me to take care of things. And so I didn't really put all this together. I didn't feel like, was I chosen, or what is this? Until I got older and I started looking back and connecting the dots to all these things that happened. And I wonder if I was chosen to understand abused kids, to adopt the kids, and to foster the ones I did. because it takes one to know one. Like, nobody really understands a child's behavior unless you come from what they did. And because most people never wanted to hear what happened to me as a child. And I saw how closed off everybody is from that stuff. Who wants to hear these horrible things? And a lot of people don't believe that it even happened. They don't see how a parent could do something like that. Or they don't understand why you wouldn't have told. Or they don't understand so much. And I knew. And I knew what it was like to keep it quiet, to carry it, for it to come out in your behaviors. And then not only just that, with having the 9 adopted kids that my husband and I adopted together, with foster kids, they go back home. When you adopt, you get to know these behaviors long term. They're mothers now with teenagers of their own. And I have seen the effects of so much and understand so much about the child welfare system that I could have never understood when I was a child abuse investigator, that I understand now the long-term effects, because children's services, child protection services, they don't do studies on how well their programs are working. And I can see full circle now how badly they're not working. I can see now with new eyes that I could have never had before what needs to be done. And the bottom line is, kids need to stay with their families. If they can't stay with mom and dad, if it's truly that bad, then grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, cousins, brother, sister, somebody. This is compared, you can compare what's happening to when children were slaves and taken from their families and put with another farm and never see their family again. You can compare it to that. You can compare it to, say, if you were 2 years old and you love your mom and dad. Maybe things aren't perfect there, but you love your mom and dad. That's your family. And somebody comes and takes you, say, kidnaps you off the street. This is your new home now. Whether you were kidnapped because it's a bad person that kidnapped you, or it's children's services that kidnapped you for protection, it doesn't matter. You were taken away and you never get to see your family again. You'll be a good little girl, good little boy. But when you get to be a teenager, even if you were taken at birth, they now know that when a child's taken at birth because, say, the mom can't take the child, or maybe the mom's drug addicted and they can't keep it, whatever the reason, good or bad, the child's given up. They now know to take an article of that mom's clothing, her nightgown, her shirt, something, and keep with that baby as long as they can, because the baby is in such shock and trauma from the removal. And people think, oh, they don't know that mother. They were just, no, they know her scent. They knew her 9 months. They heard her voice. They have that bond. And, they may be gone at birth, and then years later, they want to find their birth family. They have a longing. And these kids we got were anywhere from age 4 to age 11. They were good. I felt like Snow White. Like I had all these kids that loved me. I had the perfect family. I had my fairy tale come true, right? They were beautiful kids. We had a beautiful family. Then they started acting up. They started telling lies. They started trying to destroy our family. What the heck's going on? And long story short, they just wanted mom and dad. You can have a beautiful home. You can offer them a new car and college and all. It don't matter. And mom might, be the worst person in the world. But they got to go find out for themselves. And there's that bond. And it hurts the adoptive parents that wanted to make a family with these kids. They're broken. And you don't know they're broken. They look fine. They're cute. They're cuddly. They're calling you mom and dad day one. Okay, that's not normal. They're playing the role. What they've seen on TV, what they see other kids doing. You're told you're adopted now. I'm your mom and dad. They play it out. You don't know that secretly at night they're blowing a kiss out to the window to mom, And so for me personally, my story doesn't end with, okay, I have a podcast and, 400 guests. Everybody's telling their NDE. It's not just about the NDE.
Peggy, how can people find you and your work?
I have a YouTube channel called NDE TV, like Near Death Experience, NDE TV, and I interview near-death experiencers, NDE researchers, NDE filmmakers, and I have a book called The Will of a Wildflower. It's available on Amazon, and my email is ndetv@yahoo.com.